Hi, welcome to my channel. For today's video, I'm going to be talking all about the Twisted series by Ana Huang. So I just recently read Twisted Lies, which is the last book in this series, and I loved it. I have loved this entire series so far, so I knew I wanted to make a video talking about all 4 books. At one point last year, I did do a video sharing my review of the first 2 books. So now that I'm done with the series, I wanted to go ahead and add on my review of the last 2 books. I also decided to make this like kind of a guide to this series, so I am going to be talking about all 4 books. So I'm going to try not to go like too in depth on the first 2 books since I did already do a review video for them, but I will be kind of sharing more of my thoughts on the last 2. But on top of that, I'm also going to talk about all 4 books and kind of just share information on them, especially if you haven't read them and you're interested in reading them. I'm going to be kind of talking about the reading order and just explaining what these books are all about, like the characters, the tropes, the plots, all that stuff. So yeah, this is going to be completely spoiler free. I am going to share a little bit of my thoughts, but I'm going to keep them all spoiler free. So this is more of just like information about these books. In the end, I'm also going to be sharing my ranking of the book since I am done with it now. I'm going to share just my order of favorite to least favorite, but there's not going to be any spoilers throughout this video. So I'm going to go ahead and share the reading order first. So the first book in the series is Twisted Love, and then book 2 is Twisted Games, book 3 is Twisted Hate, and then book 4 is Twisted Lies. So these are the 4 books. I did buy these special edition covers. There are covers with people on them, so that's another option. I personally really liked these, and I liked that they're kind of like the discreet versions. So all 4 of these books are standalones. They can be read on their own, but they do connect with each other and the timelines do overlap. I think if you were to like skip a book and read one of the other ones, it should still make sense. You might be like a little bit confused, but I feel like you can still pick up on it. So they can all be read on their own, but that's more so if you want to skip a book. If you do want to read all 4 of them, I would definitely recommend reading them in order, especially because like I said, the timelines do overlap, so you kind of see some like overlapping things that happen in the last book happen in like the next one in other characters' perspectives. So yeah, I definitely would recommend reading all 4. I wouldn't skip any. I think they're all really good. And another thing is, if you don't read them in order, there are going to be spoilers for past books in like the books following it, so I would just recommend reading them in order if you are planning to read all 4 of them. But again, if you really like want to skip a book, like just have no interest in reading it at all, then that's totally fine. You can do that. They all should make sense on their own. So now I just kind of want to go into like an explanation of what this series is all about and kind of the main overall like point of it. So basically it follows 4 friends. It's a group of 4 girls that met in college and they're just really close friends, and each book follows like a different girl, and you kind of see each of their relationships like as they meet their significant other and eventually fall for them. And so in these books, the male main characters are kind of morally gray, so definitely like keep that in mind if you're not a fan of like morally gray characters. It's definitely at different levels. Some are kind of worse than others. So yeah, they're definitely not like these super sweet like lighthearted romances at all. And each of these books does have dual POV, so you get the male main character's perspective and the female main character's perspective. And I think with each of them, the writing just gets better and better like as the books go on, you know, and they also get spicier, I think. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind too. These books are adult books. They're definitely 18 plus, and also definitely check trigger warnings for these books. Pretty much all of the main characters have had some sort of like trauma or like just tragic thing that's happened to them in the past, so definitely check trigger warnings for these books if you need to. So now I'm going to go ahead and go into the first book, which is Twisted Love. So Twisted Love follows Alex and Ava, and the main tropes in this one are Grumpy Sunshine and brother's best friend. They're also neighbors, so it has like that trope, they're next door neighbors, and then it's kind of also the I hate everyone but you trope. And so in this book, what happens is Ava's brother, he's like very protective over her, and he's going away for a year. He is in medical school and he's leaving the country for this program for a year, and so because he's super protective over her, he kind of worries about her. He sees her as being kind of naive because she's just really trusting of people and always kind of wants to see the best in people. And so when he leaves, he asks his best friend, which is Alex, to kind of watch over her and just make sure that she stays out of trouble and that she's like safe and okay while he's gone. So he ends up moving next door to her house into Josh's house. Josh is Ava's brother, and he's kind of like living there temporarily just to keep an eye on her. But he's just a very cold person, extremely distant. Like Ava doesn't really know him at all, and her and her friends kind of decide to come up with this plan to kind of like evoke some emotions out of him, just because they have never seen him like show any emotions at all. So they come up with this like little 5-step plan or something to like bring out these different emotions in him. And so as Ava is doing this plan, which she kind of like knows it's a little bit childish, but she kind of does it anyway, and yeah, as she's doing it, she ends up kind of starting to like him and fall for him a little bit. So yeah, that's mainly like what goes on between the 2 of them. However, they both have really traumatic past, and a lot of the book you're kind of like trying to figure out what happened to both of them. And when you do, like both of their stories are very traumatic and really like tragic, you know, so definitely just be aware of that, check trigger warnings for this one. And so because of those things kind of going on, this book also is like a little bit suspenseful. It definitely has a lot going on. There's just kind of a lot of different like plot lines and stuff going on in this book. This one is probably the most like chaotic of all of these books, just with the different things going on. But personally, I liked that. Like, I think it kept me really interested and engaged in this book the entire time. So I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a really good start to this series. I remember I was completely obsessed with it. I literally could not put this book down when I was reading it. So yeah, this one was the one that I actually finished the fastest out of all of these books, and I just really enjoyed it a lot more than I was expecting to. So I ended up rating it 4.5 stars. So now moving on to book 2, which is Twisted Games. This book follows Bridget and Reese, and so Bridget again is one of the friends in this friend group, and then Reese is her bodyguard because Bridget is a princess of this European country. So the main tropes in this one are princess bodyguard. It's kind of enemies to lovers, and then it obviously has forced proximity because he's her bodyguard, and then obviously it's also forbidden because of that, and then it's also an age gap, and it's kind of a slow burn too. And so I did just want to say with the age gap, they are 10 years apart. I think she's like 21 or 22 when the book starts. I don't know, it's like her last year of college when the book starts, and then obviously he's like 10 years older than her, but this book does take place over a couple years, so I think by the end of it she was like 24. So I did just want to mention that I don't think the age gap was like a huge deal in this book. It never like came up as an issue of him being like older than her or anything like that. There was never any like weird dynamic of him being older than her, and it wasn't like something that bothered me at all. It was something that I kind of like forgot about for the most part. Like, I knew he was 10 years older than her, but it wasn't something that I was like bothered by at all, because I don't think they made it like an issue at any point in the book. So I just wanted to say that if you're not really like a fan of age gaps, I definitely would still say to give this one a chance. So like I said, Bridget is a princess, but she is living in the US and like going to school and everything. These books do take place in Washington DC, which I forgot to say that, but they all take place in DC. So the bodyguard that she's had for years, he decides that he is gonna kind of take a break because his wife just had a baby, or his wife is about to have a baby, so he's gonna go back home to like be with her. So because of that, she obviously needs a new bodyguard, and that's where Reese comes in. So Reese and Bridget clash like a lot at first. Like, they don't really get along. He takes his job very seriously. Like, he doesn't really let her do things because he just is very serious about protecting her at all times, and so because of that she gets really frustrated with him. So they kind of like just clash a lot. They don't really get along. So that's where like the enemies part kind of comes in, but they don't exactly like hate each other. They just kind of don't like each other in the beginning, but eventually they do kind of start to get along a little bit better, and they do kind of start to like each other too. But obviously, like, he's her bodyguard and they can't really like do anything about that. And so initially Bridget wasn't in line to be the queen because she has an older brother, so he kind of is next in line after their grandfather, who's currently the king. But then her brother kind of decides to give it up, and that obviously leaves her to take the place because she's next in line. So she kind of has no choice at this point, and she never wanted to become the queen. Like, it just wasn't something she ever pictured because she knew she wasn't gonna have it and she didn't want it in the first place. But now she kind of has to, and it just puts her in this like difficult situation because she's falling for Reese, but that's very like forbidden for her. Like, she shouldn't be falling for him because she's about to become the queen. So yeah, so that's kind of the main plot of this book. This one is kind of a longer book. Each book does get longer throughout the series, but this one also takes place over a longer period of time. It takes place like over about 2 years. So there's a lot that happens. The book is split into like a part 1 and a part 2, so there's definitely a lot that goes on in part 2 of this book. So yeah, I loved this book a lot. I remember not expecting to love it more than Twisted Love, and then I was just completely blown away by how good it was. And I just remember, like, because it was Princess Bodyguard, I wasn't really that interested in that. Like, I didn't really care to read it, and then I read it and it became like one of my favorite books of all time now. So yeah, this book I think is amazing. I really loved the main conflict of this book. I won't go into what happens, but I just loved that it was like kind of an outside thing that was affecting their relationship, and I just love how everything got resolved in this book, and I just really loved their relationship. I think they had a very strong relationship that had me just rooting for them so much. So yeah, I was obsessed with this book. I still am. I love Reese and Bridget, and so this one was a 5-star read. So now going into book 3, which is Twisted Hate. So this book follows Jules, which again, she's one of the best friends in this friend group, and then it also follows Josh. And so I mentioned Josh earlier. He is Ava's brother, and then he's also Alex's best friend. So this book is enemies to lovers. It's also like enemies with benefits, and it's also the best friend's brother trope, and I guess kind of the siblings best friend trope too. So in this book, these two characters were hinted at like like in the last one, each of the books kind of hints at which couple is kind of coming next. And so this one they were hinted at the end of Twisted Games. And basically Josh and Jules have hated each other since the moment that they met. Jules was Ava's freshman year roommate in college. I think that's how they initially met. And so Josh didn't like her from the moment that he met her just because he felt like she wasn't a very good influence for his sister. He was worried that she would get into trouble if she hung out with Jules. And so basically he just kind of didn't like her from that moment, and she didn't like him either because of that. And so since then they've kind of just had this like back and forth thing where they don't like each other. They're constantly saying mean things to each other when they see each other. Even like years into this friendship where Jules has proved herself to be a good friend, like they still kind of have this hatred between them. So in this book, like I said, Josh and Jules, they hate each other, but one night, I don't really remember like what happens that leads to this, but they end up sleeping together, but I literally don't remember why, like what led to that. But anyway, after that, they kind of just forget about it. But then Josh approaches Jules one day and he proposes that they have like a friends with benefits relationship without the friends part, so kind of an enemies with benefits relationship. So yeah, eventually she agrees to it, and that's kind of what happens between them. And obviously, like with all the books that are under this trope, they eventually start to fall for each other as they start to spend more time together, especially because they start to spend time together like even when they don't need to, you know, like just as friends. And so in this book there is like a little bit of suspense that happens and kind of just some things that come up that cause like conflicts for them. I will say that this book is the spiciest of the four in my opinion, but again, that's just my opinion. I feel like the level of spice is different for everyone, but I really enjoyed this one. I liked the overall story and I really loved the writing. Like I said, you definitely see like an improvement with each book. I think the writing is good like throughout them, but I also feel like you see an improvement like through the books. I will say that Josh and Jules are my least favorite couple, but I do still really love them and I do think that they have really good chemistry. I also really loved the banter between them, and what I really loved about them is that they had this kind of like teasing relationship with each other throughout the time that they kind of hated each other, and even when they get together like they still continue to tease each other like they did before they were a couple. So I just really loved that they had this really like kind of funny banter in the beginning, and you get to see that even though they are finally together and they finally like actually like each other, like they still continue to tease each other. With these characters, I really loved Jules. I feel like Josh kind of just like dismissed her as like this person who's just gonna like be like the wild one who gets everyone in trouble, but then you get to this book and you see like the type of person she is, and I just really ended up liking her a lot. I feel like she's also a really good friend like to her friends, like she's a very loyal friend to them. And then Josh, I feel like he's the most normal of the guy main characters. I mentioned earlier how they're kind of a little bit morally gray. I think he could be considered a little bit morally gray because of some stuff that happens in this book, but for the most part he's like the most normal to me of these characters. Like he's just a doctor, like he has kind of a normal job compared to like the other guys, but I also really like what he brings to the group, and I feel like you get to see a lot more of that in the fourth book. And in this one I really loved kind of seeing their relationship develop and like them kind of obviously becoming friends first before eventually becoming a couple. And I also just really loved seeing the way Josh's opinion changed on Jules. I feel like he was kind of being the more judgmental one in this situation, where he was kind of like thinking things about her and just making assumptions about her, and then eventually he kind of like realized that he was wrong. And so I really liked that he realized that and like moved past that. And then one of my favorite parts of this book is their first date. It was just so cute. I won't talk about what happened, but it was just really, really cute. I really loved that scene. It did make me really love Josh. However, I feel like he kind of got ruined for me in the end, because I feel like the groveling in this book wasn't that good. So after that I kind of like didn't love him as much as I did, but this was still a really great book overall and I was really happy with it. I loved getting to see all of like the side characters from the past books come in this one, and also really loved getting more of Ava and Alex because we didn't really get to see them like too much in the second book, and so I feel like you get to see more of them because Alex is Josh's best friend, so you kind of get to see more of that. And I also really liked the friendship between Alex and Josh. Like I loved seeing them kind of develop their friendship and just get closer to each other, and it was just fun to like see kind of their friendship together because I feel like we didn't get to see too much of that in the first book. So this book I rated it 4.75 stars. I thought it was a really great book, but it just didn't feel like 5 stars, so that's why I rated it 4.75. So now I'm going to move on to the last book, which is Twisted Lies. So this book follows Christian and Stella. So again, Stella is part of the friend group, of course, and then Christian is a CEO of like a security company, and so he actually gets introduced in book 2 because he is the CEO of the company that Reese worked for as a bodyguard. And so in that book we get to see a little hint at Christian and Stella, and you kind of get to see where this obsession starts for him because he is very obsessed with her. So that's one of the main tropes, is the whole like boy obsessed trope. Christian is extremely obsessed with Stella, and then the other main tropes of this one are fake dating, and then they're also roommates, and this one is also a slow burn. This one is definitely the slowest of all these books. So in this book, Stella is an influencer, and she kind of gets this opportunity where she could be like a brand ambassador for this really like big like high-end fashion brand, and so she's kind of competing against other people, and she's kind of been like stagnant in her growth on Instagram. She realizes that she needs to do something to like change that, and one of her kind of solutions is to find a boyfriend, like to fake date her, because she knows that she doesn't really want to be in a real relationship. That's one of the things about Stella, is she's kind of like not really someone who's dated that much before, and she doesn't really like do relationships, like she just hasn't in the past, and that's something you learn about her like in the other books, and then you kind of see more of her in this one, obviously. And so in this book, like I said, she's trying to find a fake boyfriend, and Christian finds out about this because he sees her when she's out one night, and then she eventually tells him like what's going on, and so he offers to be her fake boyfriend because first he wants to help her, but then it would also kind of benefit him because he is kind of like this rich guy who's like looking for clients and stuff, so he goes to a lot of events and he could use like a date for these events. So that's basically what he tells her for his like end of the deal. So yeah, eventually she agrees to it. They start fake dating, but there's kind of a lot going on. Christian has a lot of stuff going on, especially like with his company, and Stella has kind of some stuff going on in her life, like with her family and just with her personal life. And so at one point her safety is kind of like in jeopardy, and Christian ends up having her like move into his apartment. He lives like a floor above her. He also owns the building that they both live in, and he lowered her rent for her because he is obsessed with her and she couldn't afford to live there, so he lowered it for her just so she could live there, which I love. But anyway, he moves her into his apartment because it's safer for her. So that's kind of where the whole roommates thing comes into play. So yeah, the two of them are obviously fake dating, but like I said, he has this obsession with her. Stella eventually kind of starts to fall for him, which is like a little bit of an issue because even though he's very like obsessed with her, he told her from the beginning that he doesn't believe in love and he would never fall in love. There's kind of a lot that goes on in this book. I think I can't really like give away too much. Of course, there's a lot of like other outside things going on in their lives, like I said, so that stuff kind of eventually starts to affect them and affect their relationship. But yeah, so going into my thoughts, I loved this book so much. I really enjoyed reading it. I thought it was amazing. I said earlier that it's a slow burn, which it definitely is. It's very slow for like things to actually happen between them, but the book itself I don't think was like a slow book. Like there was constantly things going on, and I think it was like really interesting the whole time with like the way the plot was moving forward. And in this one, I really loved seeing all of the past characters because you get to see all four couples, and I loved kind of seeing the dynamic between all of them, especially with the four guys, because they start teasing Christian so much because of his whole thing where he said he doesn't believe in love, but it's so obvious that he's falling for her, which I love when that happens in books, like when they say that they like don't believe in love and that they're not gonna fall in love, and then they just end up falling like so hard. And so in this book, the other guys like actually see it kind of before even he does, and they like are just teasing him so much about it, and it was just really like funny to read that. So yeah, I ended up really loving this couple together. I feel like before this book came out, everyone was like really obsessed with the two of them, like the idea of them as a couple, and I personally like didn't get it just because I didn't feel like I knew these characters well enough to like even care about them or like want them to be together, you know. But I was still really excited for this book, but obviously after reading it now I like completely get it, and now I just love them. So yeah, so I really liked the two of them together. I loved like the way that they were with each other and kind of like what they brought out in each other, because obviously with him, he's like a very morally gray person. I feel like he's kind of the most morally gray of these. Maybe like him and Alex are like the most morally gray, but I just love that even though he also kind of like wanted to be better for her at times a little bit. He still stays morally gray, but like he also like cares about her too, and I loved kind of seeing that in him. And then with Stella, I really loved her kind of like seeing her worth throughout this book and her like realizing that she's deserving of like her opportunities that she gets. So yeah, so with Stella, I ended up really loving her. I feel like in the last books we didn't get too much of her and we didn't really get to see like much of her personality, so I enjoyed like getting to know her in this book, and I found her to be really likable and really relatable too. And I also liked seeing her like family dynamic because you kind of get to see like that whole thing, and I thought that whole storyline with her family was really interesting. And then with Christian, I loved him so much. Like I really loved him. I kind of already said this, but I just loved how obsessed he was with her. Like yes, it was a little bit extreme and he's kind of morally gray, but I also really liked that part of the book. I also think that he is the most like intimidating of these four guys. Like they're all a little bit morally gray in some ways, but yeah, I just feel like Christian was like the most like scary and intimidating, but I also loved that he was really sweet towards Stella. And so something else I kind of want to talk about with Twisted Lies is the conflict that happens with Christian and Stella as a couple. Again, I'm not going to go into it, but I did really like reading that part because it kind of broke my heart. Like it actually made me really sad, like reading when they were kind of going through issues as a couple, and I was just really invested in their relationship, so it just made me really sad. But I also like loved that because that's how I knew I was like really invested in this story, was that it actually like affected me and made me upset to read. And so obviously, like I said, I really loved this book and I did really like the storyline, but I do feel like this couple, like Christian and Stella, are what made the book as good as it is. And the best thing about this book, I think, was the ending. Like the last few chapters, they were just so cute. Just like seeing all of the couples together and kind of seeing a little bit of like that found family like among all of them. And in this one, you do kind of get to see them in the future a little bit, so I really loved seeing that. And I was just like smiling so much while I was reading the ending of this book. Like I had to keep stopping to like react to it and just process it because it was just so cute. So yeah, I was really happy with the ending. There was also like a bonus scene for this book. All these books do have bonus scenes, but this one was probably like my favorite of the bonus scenes. It was just really cute. So this book is not my favorite in the series, but it came really close to being my favorite, especially with that ending. Like that's what made me really consider thinking of this one as my favorite in the series, but I did still really love it, and this one was a 5-star read. So now I'm going to talk about my rankings and ratings of the books. Obviously I shared kind of my star ratings as I talked about each of the books, but I'll just go over them again. So for Twisted Love, I rated it 4.5 stars, Twisted Games was 5 stars, Twisted Hate was 4.75 stars, and then Twisted Lies was 5 stars. As far as the spice, I just wanted to give my rating. I normally don't give it just because I feel like it's very subjective and it can change and all that, but I'll just kind of give like my personal rating as of now. And again, this is just what I think. And so like I said earlier, Twisted Hate was definitely the spiciest to me. I would rate it probably like a 4.5 on the spice scale. And then with Twisted Love, Twisted Games, and Twisted Lies, which are books 1, 2, and 4, I'd probably rate them kind of close to 4, maybe like a 3.75 to 4, like around that. To me, Twisted Lies was like the least spiciest of the books. I don't know if it was because it was like a slow burn, so like the spice doesn't come till like way later on in the book, or if it was just because like I was used to Ana Huang's writing at that point. Like when I first started reading her books, I definitely like had to get used to like that sort of writing, especially with like the spicy scenes. But I feel like with the 4th book, like by that point I kind of was familiar with her writing, so I knew kind of how the spicy scenes were gonna play out, so I wasn't really like shocked by them or anything. So yeah, I don't know, like I said, I think the 4th one was the least spiciest, but I don't know if that's just because I'm like used to the writing by now. But I also just feel like there were less scenes, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's about the same. It just felt like it was less, but yeah. And so for my ranking of the books, I feel like with the way I talked about them, it might be kind of obvious, but my favorite was Twisted Games, and then next is Twisted Lies, and then Twisted Love, and then Twisted Hate. So Twisted Games, I think will just always have a special place in my heart because of Reese and Bridget. I just rooted for them so much in this book. Like I just got so attached to them and their relationship. I just loved them so much. And yeah, I just like was wanting a happy ending for them like so badly. Obviously I knew they were gonna get one because all these books do have happy endings, but yeah, it was just one of those books where I just got like really like emotionally attached. And then with Twisted Lies, like I said earlier, this one came really close to like beating Twisted Games for me. I was unsure for a little bit, especially because like I said, the ending of this one was just so good that I like considered that it might be better than Twisted Games, but Twisted Games is just such a special book to me for some reason, so that's why Twisted Lies is just below it. And then with Twisted Love, I think I'm ranking this one higher just because of the characters, because I really loved Alex and Ava together, and I also loved like getting to see them throughout the next 4 books. But I do think like writing and plot wise, Twisted Hate is like a better book. And then with Twisted Hate, even though it is ranked last for me, obviously one of the books has to be ranked at the bottom, but this is still a really amazing book and I still love it. It's just kind of ranked last for these 4 books. So yeah, that's kind of my guide to the series and my overall thoughts. Like I said, I have that kind of part 1, I guess, in a way to this video where I gave like a more in-depth review of Twisted Games and Twisted Love, which it might be pretty similar to this video. I don't really remember everything that I said in that video, but yeah, I'll link that down below if you want to see that. I tried to remember to include as much information as I could in this video, but if I forgot anything or if there's anything you want to know about these books that I didn't mention, definitely just let me know. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Like I said, I think this series is amazing. I definitely would recommend it. I've really loved Ana Huang so far. I've loved her writing. She is writing a new series and I'm so excited for that. The first book comes out in the fall and I can't wait to read it. that book does follow a character that was mentioned in the series. So I'm really excited to get to that book once it's out. But yeah, definitely let me know any of your thoughts on these books. And if you liked this and you're new to my channel, I would love it if you would stick around and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.